And I think we're ready to take it away. Welcome, everybody. I'm Maggie Stogner, Executive Director for the Center for Environmental Filmmaking, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you tonight. I just am so amazed, wow, impressed about the incredible film that Emiliano Ruprah has made. He's an alum of our program from just a few years back and now famous director of Nomads. And welcome so much, Emiliano. It's just such a pleasure to have you here with us tonight. It's just an incredible film. Congratulations. I just still, I mean, it's just, I'm still just reeling from watching it. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you so much, Maggie. It's so nice to be here.
I also want to say welcome to all of my students from the Producing Environmental and Wildlife Filmmaking class. We have a pseudo live audience with us, and then of course everybody through the Eventbrite and the Environmental Film Festival of the nation's capital. So we're so pleased to be able to have shown the film on their platform and to have everybody here tonight for the Q&A. And I'm going to dive right in because there are a whole lot of questions that I know I have, and I encourage people to send questions to the chat. And so we can, mix it up with a lot of different questions as well. But I have to ask, what inspired you in the first place to make this film? Because, this is an extraordinary undertaking.
Yeah, so, I worked in Maggie after I left AU. I ended up working a lot in development. And so I learned a lot about the kinds of films that get pitched and the kinds of films that get sold and made, especially in the wildlife area. I was doing a lot of pitches for Animal Planet, National Geographic, Discovery, these kinds of channels. And I saw that a lot of the TV shows getting made about wildlife that were getting made in Latin America were kind of taking the country out of the equation. And they were being kind of sold and packaged under much more general terms. And especially in Mexico, I was seeing stuff that was being shot in Mexico that was being packaged as North America or part of some global ecosystem. And I thought, one of the big reasons I got into making films and documentaries about nature was to dialogue with people and to cause some level of awakening and action. And how are people going to be affected by a film if they don't even know that the scenes are being shot in their own country? So I thought, why not make a film in Mexico with specifically that audience in mind?
That's fantastic. The center just published an impact media report that really looks at that kind of idea of building capacity in a local country, and then really making sure that the film is distributed, to that country, not just by a US or British company coming in, filming, and then taking it back and showing it in that home country. So really building the capacity within a country. And I would love for you to address what your strategy was with that. How did you accomplish making a film with an all Mexican crew? And what commitment did that take? What was your strategy?
Yeah, so, as you know, making wildlife films is its own challenge because there's a lot of ethics involved. There's a lot of techniques that are kind of, jealously guarded by the folks who have made those kinds of films over time. So it was, I had some years of practice at Nat Geo and at Discovery. So I'd learned, some of the techniques, some of the ethics, how to work with biologists, how to film wildlife in a careful, respectful, ethical manner.
And we're going to come back to that in a minute too.
Sure. So I mean, the main objective was there's a lot of talented DPs, a lot of talented filmmakers in Mexico in general, but really the strategy was to kind of help train them, at least in that aspect of making wildlife films, so that we could, through this film, also foster this foster wildlife filmmaking in Mexico in general and give a push towards that.
And was that really boots on the ground training that you provided?
Yeah. So we did two things. One was, of course, a little bit of training, which, a lot of the training I did. Sometimes I brought a great DP friend of mine from Nat Geo, Nicholas Donnelly,
Mhm.
who's done years and years of this work and loves coming down to Mexico. And he helped shoot some of the scenes as well. And the third thing that we did is we always included biologists on our shoots. So the biologist would take us, for at least a day before shooting, through all the behaviors, how animals interact with humans, what to look out for in terms of disturbances or potential dangers, all of this kind of stuff. So there's always a biology lesson before each shoot, which was fascinating, which was helpful, and also helped all the filmmakers involved kind of stay aware and know what behaviors to look out for. So it was really, really helpful.
Boy, that's a true classroom in the wild.
Yeah, exactly.
So, this was an epic undertaking. I mean, I think everybody would love to hear just how long did it take you to make this? What were some of the complexities and the real challenges of making something on this scale?
Yeah, so you know, we we developed a film with an idea of taking a kind of a small sample of migratory species in Mexico, and through the process of financing it, ended up promising a lot of species, which wasn't necessarily my first choice. I wanted to go in depth and maybe less species, but we all know how financing films works and what
Yeah.
kind of compromises are involved there. So we ended up promising a lot of spectacle and a lot of species, which meant that we had to film between 12 and 14 migrating species. Now,
Wow.
migrating species don't always migrate at the same time. So that meant that between 12 and 14 species would take us about a year and a bit to film, because some migrations happen in one cycle. They come to Mexico and leave almost immediately during the same month. And others, like the monarch butterflies, take longer. They might come in March and leave in September, to give you an example. So it was really tough. It was all these different environments, all these different species, all these different challenges in terms of getting to these places, learning the behavior, figuring out how to film each species with its own technology and its own limitations, all across the span of basically a year and a half. So it's really, really, really tough to put together.
That's intense. Were there any particular stories of particular challenges that you'd like to share? Scariest moments, most
Yeah.
most difficult. I mean, those bats flying around drove me a little. Yeah,
Oh,
a little
the
uneasy.
bats. The bats are so tough. I mean, every species has its own challenge, but bats have to be the most difficult thing to film. For one, you have to film them at night, and you can't use light, so you have to use a special camera system. So essentially, you have to use an infrared bypass, which means you change the filter on the camera and you use these lights that don't disturb bats. So the human eye can't even recognize them. They're called infrared lights. So you're filming in darkness. And then in addition, you're doing this in caves in the dark, surrounded by, all the creepy, crawly, worst possible nightmare scenario.
I'm like getting high blood pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So you can imagine what that's like. And that's a lot of hours because you're waiting for these bats. And one of the caves where we filmed bats is in Cantamo. So basically you have to crawl into this really small space deep into a cave, and then you have to turn all the lights off. And you and whoever is the other unfortunate person, it was usually two of us there, would spend hours in the dark as snakes slowly crawl down the ceiling to capture these flying bats. Right? So you could hear them around you. You could sometimes feel them getting close, but you couldn't really, all you could move is the camera. You didn't want to scare them or affect their own natural behavior. So there's a lot of kind of nightmare stories like that, but I would have to say that bats was, takes the cake.
I wondered, because when I saw that scene, I just thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so completely at the other end of the spectrum, best moment. What was your best moment?
Best moment was probably seeing, the gray whale mother and calf. You know, seeing this amazing relationship between these gigantic creatures in this kind of safe haven. The mother taking its calf up to the surface, showing it how to breathe. You can really see all the schooling that happens, you know, and the depth of that and the importance of that relationship. It's really majestic and a really special moment to be able to witness, especially knowing all the dangers that gray whales face and will face on their migration back north as they face the orcas and many other challenges.
Yeah, very emotional. I mean, incredibly emotional. Did you use drones for all of that?
So we used a combination. We used drones, and then we did some filming from the side of the boat. So because of the regulations in Laguna San Ignacio, where we filmed the relationship between mother and calf, you're not allowed to dive because the bubbles disturb the gray whales. They've learned to be very friendly towards humans, and the mother will sometimes take her calf and introduce the calf to some of the fishermen or people on boats. So they're not too difficult to film from the boat. But what you do is you basically have to connect, create a contraption, we'll say. I don't know if my underwater DP wants me to reveal any of his secrets.
Okay.
But you have to create a contraption. So we did underwater, some stuff on a boat, and then a lot of drone.
Yeah. Well, you did a magnificent job. The whales seemed very undisturbed, and that's, you know, part of that ethical training. So important is to be able to film the animals without interfering, and particularly a mother and baby. I mean, you don't want to do anything disturbed, but I mean, overall, you want to disturb the wild, and you did a magnificent job of capturing something that just felt so relaxed for the wildlife. I think that's so important. So congratulations on that. I have a couple of questions, and then I want to get to impact, but I have a couple of questions from the audience. One is, how did you select the animals that you included in the film? And you did have some endemic species as well as migratory species. And so, I mean, I know it sounds like a lot to do 12 species, but that's a very hard list to pare down to get to those 12. So what was your criteria?
Yeah, so we knew we had a sizable budget for this film, but we also knew we weren't at the BBC, right? We didn't have years and years to film certain sequences. So I knew that we had to find a sweet spot between species that we really wanted to film for our own enjoyment, because, you know, it's not every year that you get to finance the film you want to make. So some of it has to be greed, and you have to decide what you want to do, right? And then the other kind of balance to that, or the counterbalance, was what behaviors are predictable, what species migrations can be more or less geolocated for specific seasons, and what can we rely on. So we picked a mix of relatively unreliable behaviors that we wanted to film in the interests of entertainment and science, and then some that were like, okay, just in case, let's cover our butts and make sure that we can film some stuff that we know is going to happen, like the flamingo colonies, the monarch colonies. These are relatively predictable events in relatively small geographical locations. And then there are things that are more complicated, like bats, like the howler mouse versus the scorpion. There's a lot more complexity involved in finding those other behaviors.
Yeah, and they don't, I mean, you can't call them up and make a date, right? They don't just show up. I mean, I know a lot of natural history filmmakers, and it's like, oh boy, 6 weeks and still nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask, because I think this was so much part of your original intention, but again, in our new CEF Impact Media Report, it's a really holistic look at that creative design and those decisions that you make, then the collaborations that you have, as well as the final strategies, and how that creates greater impact as a whole. And I would love for you to talk about kind of each of those in terms of the impact You've already addressed, training best practices, bringing in biologists and scientists in the field. I mean, that must have tremendous impact. And the idea of using local people and having that impact. But when you look at the whole of it, that's the collaboration and your outreach strategies, if you can address kind of that bigger goal that you were trying to achieve and probably will no doubt achieve once theaters open throughout Mexico.
Yeah, so I think originally when you're making a film, the most important thing for me at least is to figure out who your target audience is. For me, it was really specific. When I was making the film, in my mind, my target audience was the average Mexican family who goes to the cinema. That's what I kept thinking of. And when I was in Mexico, I'd see them in the streets. I'd see them walking in and out of theaters and restaurants. And that's what I was imagining. And the reason I imagined that was because I think a large percentage of those folks don't know, one, about the wildlife that Mexico has, and two, about the dangers it's facing. Mm-hmm. So I thought, if we're going to make a film strategically for impact, let's impact the largest swath of the public that we can. Let's not make a film for our friends, for environmentalists and intellectuals who already know what's going on. Let's do a wildlife film for a mass audience. So that's my objective in Mexico. I don't know if that impact's going to be achievable or not. We will have to see with the pandemic. My second kind of objective was to try to foster at least a belief in my coworkers and friends in the Mexican industry that they can make wildlife and environmental movies, that it's not just something that comes from the outside, but something that not only you can do, but you should be kind of required to do. I mean, especially being such a biodiverse country and finding ourselves in the moment in history that we do. And the third thing, I think, was to have these species recognized as falling within the Mexican territory. I can't tell you how many times, I think this is one of the reasons that I was inspired to make this film. I've seen specials on large American broadcasters filmed in these same regions, and there's never a mention that they're in Mexico. They're always fall under the banner of North America. I think it's important because a lot of those films are consumed throughout Latin America and Mexico, not because any country needs to lay claim to a species. I mean, if anything, the film's about the importance of open borders and the fact that, these species don't belong really to anyone. But I think it's important for people to recognize the patrimony that they have, and if we want them to be inspired to protect it. So I thought that, and that's been achieved through Smithsonian, which has, which essentially published the film on the Smithsonian Channel under the title of Epic Animal Migrations Mexico, I think on August 19th.
Yes, and that was that's an hour version.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. I have more questions here from viewers. Let's see. Oh, there's a lot of very specific. Maybe we can just hit these very quickly.
Sure.
How difficult was it to film the caterpillar metamorphosis? Did you track specific parents and babies? Did you film anything in a set? Let's just go with those.
Yes. So how difficult was it to film caterpillars? It was not difficult. I filmed them in my kitchen, actually, believe it or not, which I turned into a set, which many people in my household were not happy about. What was the second question?
I'll just stop with that one. No, I'm just picturing that. Yeah, I think at least it wasn't, more creepy crawlies and snakes.
Yes.
Tracking animals, specific parents and babies, being able to track and know where the animals are going to show up when? I mean, did you have special technologies for that?
No technology. I mean, that's biologists. There's people who dedicate their lives to tracking animals and who spend almost all year looking for them. So if you make, I think that's the first secret of making a good wildlife film, is getting in touch with the people who know the animals best. And if they like you, they will take you to them. If they don't, they won't.
Yeah. Well, there has to be a trust there. I mean, absolutely. And the
Yeah.
biologists do, they dedicate their lives to understanding behaviors. And that's so essential to making really good films, being able to anticipate the behavior as you're filming. And you captured that just extraordinarily well. I mean, it just beautifully. I mean, it's a whole film. I want to watch it over and over. Just disappear into that film for a while. There was a theme of migration, but also the immigration and the kind of metaphors that seem very intentional. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I wish, when I originally wrote the script, I think it was even more on the nose. So for me, I think, we're all migrants, all of us in our DNA. Every single living species on the planet is a migrant. Every seed, every cloud,
Yeah.
everything's really moved to get to the place where it is, and it's kind of still moving. So I think that speaking about animals in terms of their personal efforts in migration makes them all the more human to me. Now, the fact that this takes place in Mexico, a place whose headlines are almost always either under the banner of migration, I think was clearly done on purpose. The third connection I kind of wanted to make was that, yes, animals do suffer some very similar challenges on a personal level that humans do.
Mhm.
I didn't make that incredibly clear and on the nose, because some of the producers involved in the film wisely told me, some people might think you're comparing animals to humans, to migrants. And my retort to that was, well, animals are not a lower form of life. Animals are incredibly intelligent. They experience a range of concepts, so on and so forth. But that's coming from such a specific point of view that I think they were smart to limit my metaphors to something more abstract. So I would say that the idea of migration was left in a more general sense, and that migration is part of almost everything, and that it involves enormous challenges. So let us be empathetic to
Yes.
migrants, no matter what form they take.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And the empathy is so critical, and something that film can do so incredibly well. And we are all connected, right? I mean, it's one planet. So so bravo on that. Since we have a number of students, my wildlife and environmental producing class here, I would love to have you give them a little bit of career advice.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think the only career advice it would be to relentlessly pursue your passion, because and to this day, like out of 1,000 pitches, I maybe get half an interest on one. So really, it's about continuing to knock on doors and push and push and push until somebody, for some random reason says yes and gives you a chance to go make a film. I think there's no really other way around it. So if you're going to make films, you got to get used to people saying no, and then you have to get used to just figuring out how to make stuff even if people say no, right? On your own, with your friends, with your phone. I don't know. You just have to keep going. And I think it's really, really, really rewarding in the end, knowing how hard it was to get to the point where you got to make the film.
Yeah, and that's such great advice, particularly now with the pandemic. We're somewhat limited, but we have to keep going. I mean, there's just no
Yes.
doubt, and keep going creatively. I mean, you kept growing your skills, and writing and cinematography, and I mean, and directing. I mean, you really kept growing your skills and following that passion, and life doesn't stop.
No,
So
it does
so
not.
we keep going, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say thank you so much. I always ask this question, as we always do with interviews. What did I not ask you that you would like to share?
Um, I guess the one question would be, I mean, you asked me everything that I would have liked, but I guess I would ask if I think that I succeeded in the
Mm.
end. Um,
Do you know yet?
I don't know yet, but I will tell you that you have an image of a film you're going to make before you make it, and then you have the final film, and that final film is, I don't think it ever really is what your first image was.
Mm.
And I would say that I'm very proud of the film, but I think one thing that I learned in making this film was how much I love making documentaries. You know, because if it had been a fiction film, then we everything would have rested on that final piece
Mhm.
and its commercial success. But in a documentary, you end up, going to so many places, dealing with so many people's real lives, whether animal or biologist, or the town where we spent months living with locals to film certain species, uh, that there is a greater success and a greater trajectory behind the making of a documentary. So I think I kind of shifted my idea of what a successful experience making a film is. There was a paradigm shift.
Yeah, there's a great phrase, and I always appreciate the journey award. And I think documentary, it, that's just emblematic of that phrase. Is that the journey is the reward. You really,
Totally.
well, all of us in this room, I think, appreciate what it is that we experience through documentary film. And if you're not a filmmaker, you certainly appreciate the end result. So
Yeah.
I have a few thank yous to make, but Emiliano, so great to see you and be able to have this Q&A with you. And thank you so much, and congratulations on an incredible, successful film. And I wish you all the success going forward when things open up and getting the film out there in real theaters and not the virtual theater space, because I know how important it is, and what an impact it can have. And I want to thank AU School of Communication, the Center for Environmental Filmmaking, Center for Latin American and Latino Studies, the Entertainment and Media Alumni Alliance, the Mexican Cultural Institute, such a wonderful partner, the Environmental Film Festival in the nation's capital, an ongoing partner with us with the Center for Environmental Filmmaking. And thank you everyone for tuning in, really appreciate it. And special thanks to Matt, who organizes these, and to Sam, who is organizing, and others at the DCEFF. And again, thank you everybody so much.